I love a thriller that doesn't let you off easy, so today I'm recommending 10 psychological thrillers that span space horror, art house extremity, and one kitchen movie that somehow stressed me out more than half the horror films on this list. All 10 are streaming right now across Netflix, Prime Video, and a few other platforms. Full breakdown of where to find each one is in the pinned comment.
At 0300 this morning, TDRS picked up an automated navigation beacon broadcasting a 2-minute interval.
Starting at number 10, and I have to admit up front, this one's not as airtight as I'd like it to be, but I still love recommending it. We're in 2047, deep space, and a rescue ship gets sent to find the research vessel that disappeared 7 years earlier near Neptune. When they finally reach it, the ship is just sitting there, dark and cold, with zero human life signs on board. There's a moment where the crew explains the ship's gravity drive, and the explanation amounts to basically, we bent space, don't worry about the details, which is thin for a crew of supposed space-time experts. The captain's wardrobe and some period details don't hold up great either, but none of that really matters once the film leans into its horror, because that's where it earns its reputation. There's a clear Solaris influence running through the hallucinations the crew start experiencing, except here, those visions are aimed more at making you flinch than making you think, and honestly, that's fine by me. There's also this lingering idea that maybe what broke wasn't physics, just a belief about physics, and I always thought that was a more interesting angle than the film fully commits to. Messy, sure, but the dread is real. This one's Event Horizon, and even 30 years later, it still gets under my skin.
Number 9 is going to test some of you, and I want to say that clearly before you press play. This is Lars von Trier doing exactly what Lars von Trier does, building something so confrontational that audiences either walk out or call it a masterpiece. Sometimes both opinions coming from the same person. Matt Dillon plays a serial killer, recounting 5 of his most brutal crimes to a guide as the 2 of them descend toward hell. And the film treats his murders less like crimes and more like art installations he's curating. I won't pretend every stretch of this works. There are sections, especially in the middle, where it feels like von Trier is a little too pleased with his own provocation, and the 153-minute runtime tests your patience more than once. But the film is clearly wrestling with accusations that have followed von Trier his whole career, the misanthropy, the misogyny, and instead of running from those labels, he leans straight into them and dares you to react. By the time it reaches its final stretch, the visual language shifts into something genuinely striking, more than I expected going in. It's not a fun watch, and I'd never call it comfortable, but it's not boring either, and that counts for something. This one's The House That Jack Built, and it's not for everybody, but it knows exactly what it is.
Get out.
Sorry, man.
Get out! Yo!
Number 8 is the one most of you have probably already seen. But if you somehow haven't, this is the one to fix that with tonight. Jordan Peele's directorial debut, and it's still one of the smartest horror films of the last decade. Daniel Kaluuya plays a guy meeting his white girlfriend's parents for the first time, and within the opening stretch, you already sense something's wrong, even before you can name it. What I love about this one is how patient it is. Peele lets the dread build through small, uncomfortable social moments before the film tips into anything more overtly horrifying. And he never undercuts the tension with comedy the way a lot of horror-comedy hybrids do. The cast carries a lot of weight here too. Kaluuya sells the unease beautifully, and Bradley Whitford and Catherine Keener play sinister friendly so well, it's almost funny how unsettling they are. I'll admit the back half doesn't quite sustain the same tension as the setup, and the climax leans a bit more conventional than the first act promised. But for a directorial debut, released in February no less, this was an enormously confident swing, and it basically proved smart horror could also be a box office hit. This one's Get Out, and if you've genuinely never seen it, that's homework.
Number 7 is one where I have to be careful with how much I say because the less you know walking in, the better it works. Takashi Miike directs this based on Ryu Murakami's novel, and on the surface it's about a grieving widower who, with some encouragement from friends, fake runs film auditions just to meet women. He falls for one candidate who seems almost too perfect. Calm, kind, soft-spoken, and I'll just say too perfect is doing a lot of work in that description. This is a slow burn, almost deceptively so, to the point where you might start wondering if you put on a quiet relationship drama by accident. That patience is the whole point though, because once this film turns, it turns hard, and it's been credited as a direct influence on the modern torture horror subgenre. Films like Saw and Hostel owe it something. I'd argue it's smarter than most of what it influenced since it's working through psychology and obsession rather than escalating gore for its own sake. The final stretch gets genuinely surreal, almost art house in its editing, which won't land for everyone. This one's Audition, and the title means a lot more by the end than it does at the start. Number 6 is probably the heaviest film on this entire list, and I want to say that clearly because it deserves a real warning. This French horror film from Pascal Laugier isn't interested in jump scares or monsters. It's interested in how far the human mind can be pushed and what's supposedly waiting on the other side of that pain. It follows a young woman who escapes a horrific captivity from her childhood, and her path forward, along with the path of the friend who helped her, gets considerably darker from there. There's a long stretch in the back half that is just relentless, and I don't say that lightly, but it's not gratuitous in the way torture horror often is. It's building towards something genuinely philosophical about belief, suffering, and what a cult in this story believes lies beyond extreme pain. Critics have used words like punishing and transcendent for this one in the same breath, and that tells you most of what you need to know going in. I'll say clearly, if you ever stumble across the American remake, skip it completely. It strips out everything that made the original worth sitting through. This one's Martyrs, and it's not a movie you watch twice lightly, but it's also not one you forget.
Just tell him I'm so sorry. I've just got so much going on.
Number 5 is a strange inclusion on a psychological thriller list since there's nothing supernatural and nobody gets murdered. But I had to put it here because it stressed me out more than half the horror films above it. Boiling Point is shot in a single continuous take, following a head chef through one catastrophic shift in a busy restaurant kitchen, health inspectors, an overbooked dining room, staff conflict, and then his demanding boss shows up unannounced, and the film just keeps stacking problems without letting the camera or you catch a breath. I've heard from people with actual kitchen experience that this thing gave them genuine flashbacks, which says something about how accurate the chaos feels. The one-shot approach could have easily felt like a stunt, but it works here because it traps you in real time alongside these characters, and you feel every mounting disaster as it lands. It's not scary in a traditional sense, it's more anxiety as a viewing experience, and somehow that's even more effective than I expected going in. There's also a small detail planted early, a nut allergy mentioned almost in passing, worth keeping in the back of your mind. This one's Boiling Point, and it might be the most stressful 90 minutes on this entire list. Number 4 is the one where I think the lead's physical transformation alone deserves more credit than it usually gets. Christian Bale plays a machinist who hasn't slept properly in over a year, and the toll that's taken on his body is honestly hard to watch in places. He's wasted down to almost nothing. He's isolated, exhausted, and after a workplace accident involving a coworker, his already shaky grip on reality starts slipping further. Is the strange new coworker he keeps running into actually real? Is anyone around him being straight with him? Or is he the unreliable one? The film plays this close to the chest and lets you sit in his paranoia right alongside him, without rushing toward easy answers. There's even a nice literary touch where he's reading Dostoevsky's The Idiot, and the parallels to his own situation aren't subtle once you notice them, but I appreciated that the film trusted you to catch it yourself. This is a slow unraveling rather than a jump scare thriller, and it rewards patience because by the end, things click into place in a way that actually feels earned instead of like a cheap twist. This one's The Machinist, and it might make you reconsider your own sleep schedule. Before I get into my final 3 picks, if you've made it this far into a list this dark, do me a favor and hit subscribe and tap the like button while you're at it. It genuinely helps this channel keep finding the underrated stuff instead of just recycling the same 10 thrillers everyone already knows. Alright, back to it. Number 3 is less a thriller in the traditional sense and more a gut punch wearing a thriller's clothes, but it earns its spot here regardless. The Road follows a father and his son walking through a post-apocalyptic America, with civilization gone and most of what's left of humanity having turned on itself. Their destination is the coast, which works less as an actual goal and more as a fragile idea they're both holding onto just to keep moving. What makes this one work isn't action or mystery, it's the constant low-grade tension of survival itself. Every stranger is a potential threat, every shelter is a potential trap, and the film never lets that pressure ease up for long. Viggo Mortensen's performance is quietly devastating, all restraint and exhaustion, and the flashbacks to a happier life before the collapse hit harder because of how stripped down everything else in the film is.
I'll be honest, this one is bleak in a way that's genuinely too much for some people, and I don't think that's a flaw exactly, I think that's the point. But if you want a thriller that's really about what people protect when everything else is already gone, this delivers on that. This one's The Road, and maybe don't put this on if you're already having a rough week. Number 2 is the Ordinary People Make Terrible Decisions entry, and it might honestly be the quietest, most patient build on this entire list. 2 brothers and a friend stumble onto $4 million in cash from a plane that crashed out in the snow. Keep it quiet, split it later, nobody gets hurt. Easy. You already know that's not how this plays out. What makes this one so effective is how plausible every bad decision feels in the moment. Nobody here is a criminal mastermind. They're just regular guys getting in over their heads one small lie at a time. And watching that compound is genuinely stressful in the best way. Bill Paxton and Billy Bob Thornton carry the brother dynamic with way more emotional weight than a premise like Guys Find Money in the Woods really has any right to produce. It's part character study, part slow motion collapse, and people have compared it to In Cold Blood for good reason, because it understands the scariest villain here is just a normal person who convinced themselves this one exception was fine. This one's a simple plan, and the title is carrying a pretty heavy dose of irony by the end. And at number 1, I'm closing with the heaviest, most fully realized drama on this entire list. Mystic River follows 3 childhood friends from a working-class Boston neighborhood, already quietly shaped by something terrible that happened to one of them as kids, who get pulled back together as adults when one man's daughter is murdered. It's technically built around the mystery, but Clint Eastwood isn't really interested in the whodunit mechanics. He's interested in how trauma doesn't stay buried in the past, it just waits, and how grief can turn people into versions of themselves you don't recognize. Sean Penn, Tim Robbins, and Kevin Bacon are all doing career best work here. The kind of acting where a single glance carries history you can feel even before the film fills in the specifics. It's a slow, devastating build toward an ending that refuses to give you a clean resolution. It gives you something closer to real life instead, messier and sadder and harder to shake off. If you only watch one film off this entire list, genuinely make it this one. This one's Mystic River, and it earns the word masterpiece without ever showing off about it. Coming up next, I'm recommending 12 sci-fi movies you can stream right now on HBOMax. Some you've definitely heard of, some I genuinely don't think you have, and I'm being honest about every single pick, so go check that one out next. I'll see you in the next one.